cost for providing feedback on the as-built plans of, I believe it's $2,400. And we need that in order to get that feedback. Although it sounds like they have been willing to start that work. You know, we won't get the feedback until that money is paid, but they have started that work and indicated, you know, estimated based on a project of this size, that, you know, takes several weeks to get that feedback to us, which, you know, seems you know, reasonable from my perspective. So I think, you know, the discussion in our last meeting was around the, you know, the peer review funds, because obviously the next step is for us to get comments from the peer reviewer to see where we are with the project. And so I believe I see Mr. Benson on here. I guess the question to you is, are we able to get as soon as possible a minimum of $2,400 to our 53G account so that we have that money to be able to pay the peer reviewer promptly?
Yes.
Could we get that in the next week, do you think?
Yeah, I can put it in the mail.
Okay, that would really help not have a delay in the process, and will also allow us to, once we get that in the account, we'll be able to communicate to the peer reviewer that, you know, we'll be able to pay that invoice to them, and, you know, not have a delay, you know, while they wait around for that. And then I think the next step there is, once we get the feedback from the peer reviewer, you know, typically we of course, you know, share that with the developer engineer, and then typically try to discuss that as, you know, I mean, we don't know what's going to be, right, at the next available planning board meeting after that. So it's just going to depend on exactly when we get that in the next couple of weeks.
Sure. And to the chair, if I may?
Yeah, please.
Not to get too deep in the technical weeds, but for all the residents here that are presently attending, peer review is effectively a competent engineer that is hired by the town to check the work of the developer and the developer's engineers to make sure that what was requested and required and approved to be built is built as built to specification, making sure that what was approved is what is manifested in the neighborhood. So it's a mammoth amount of work to go through every single item within a large subdivision, and then also to check that massive amount of work versus the equally massive amount of work that was approved. So this is not exactly a small undertaking, and the fact that they're willing to get this done in a few to several weeks is it shows that they've placed a pretty high priority on that. And for that, niche engineering has my gratitude. After that is done, whatever deficiencies that are found by the peer reviewer, and it's routine to find deficiencies, they'll assemble all of those little tasks into what's called a punch list, and that punch list needs to be completed to the specifications that were approved. And then at that point, then we can move on down to the path of road acceptance down later. So this is not exactly a quick response sort of process, and really you don't want it to be a quick process, because quick processes tend to make mistakes, or they tend to have oversight and they miss something. So that's just something I want to make sure that all the residents here understand, is that this is a pretty mammoth amount of work, and we're really at our backs are to the wall to try to get it on for this meeting. And it's going to be a tall order to fill, but I know everyone will do their level best to make it happen. That's all, sir.
Mr. Chair, may I make a comment?
Yeah, please.
The inspecting engineer for the development, who was also the town engineer previous to Niche, previously submitted a letter to the town saying that all the improvements that we did, he inspected and met the town specifications. So Niche is to be reviewing the plans, but the previous reviewing engineer that oversaw the project and witnessed the construction of the road and so forth was present during the construction of the road as required. He's already done that task and submitted a letter to the town.
Yeah, thanks. And we have all the reports from, from Mr. Hamway, who was
Yeah.
previous peer engineer, and we can certainly share those with Niche if needed.
Yep, just wanted to tell you that I think Nish's scope will be to review the plans and make sure that the tolerance levels of what is actually in the field, which is reported on the plans, meets with town specifications.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, my experience is, that it's sort of checking the horizontal and vertical elevations of manholes, piping, and so forth to make sure that they are where they're supposed to be. But as far as the construction of what actually took place when they went in the ground, that was all witnessed by the town.
Sure, understood. And in my experience on the board, I think there was only one other development that came through for road acceptance, and the process of reviewing the peer reviewer of the as-built plans, that there was a list of things, but they were somewhat minor. Some were just things on the plans. They're sort of draft plans for a reason, right? And some things needed to be addressed on the plans before the peer review would recommend. And then there were some minor things inside. Obviously, every project's a little different, but we of course have all the records from past site inspections that could be looked at if or provided to Niche if needed. And we wouldn't, we have that.
Right. I mean, there was actually, as far as, there is a punch list that already exists that was done previously by Fred Hamway, and Niche was present when we paved the roads, when the top coat went in. They inspected the work as it went in. They witnessed the work as we paved the top coat and replaced the berms. They had already created a punch list, for example, on the berms that needed to be replaced, because we had installed the berms. Berms that are there, they're not the original berms anyway. Those were replaced pursuant to Niche's on-site inspection and them saying, well, we came to an agreement on which berms needed to be taken out and then replaced. So Niche has been involved previously. They certainly weren't the engineer that was present during like the underground installation of utilities. That was Fred Hamway. But anyway, just wanted to let you know.
Sure. To the chair, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Again, I'm in receipt of that punch list also back from a couple of years back, and there were quite a few items that appear complete, but they haven't been verified yet. Regardless, that's why the peer review process exists, and constructing a subdivision is not exactly a simple process. So it's very routine that small items arise on a punch list, and like you said before, most of them tend to be quite minor. Maybe one is moderate, but typically they're just, crossing T's, dotting I's, and adding punctuation. From driving through the neighborhood, it seems like a lot of the big ticket items have already been completed. So really, it's just letting Niche kind of complete the process there and submit their final findings to us in terms of that punch list. That's all.
Mr. Chair, 2 questions, if I may. It's Vince LaRosa.
Sure, go ahead.
First of all, first question is, what is the drop dead last day that this would need to be signed off on, or there's a punch list that's created and items need to be completed, and then they're signed off on for it to be completed in a manner which would be acceptable to be put in front of the selectmen for this year's meeting for approval?
I don't know, Todd, if we have a drop dead date, are you aware of a specific date for that?
I'm reticent to provide a hard date because there are too many moving parts and variables before it actually gets to that process. If you like, Vince, I can go ahead and dig up a very last date, but I'm reticent to provide dates because that item is a living, moving target. So it's quite hard to provide, but we would need to have everything in pretty much, I won't say ASAP, but quite expeditiously if we want to
Sure.
try to get in for this year's warrant. It's going to be a very, very tough item to meet. But a lot of it really depends on how much work remains to be completed, whether or not the hanging bills and invoices that are currently present can be paid on time for us to receive that punch list, for example. There's quite a few obstacles that stand in the way, and we don't have enough bond money to cover all of the present invoices. So we're going to be trying to get the stars to align to make this happen this year, but I cannot guarantee anything in good faith. I can't in good conscience. But we'll
No,
do
I
our
understand you can't guarantee anything, just trying to understand what the date is, that's all.
I think
Sure
the
thing, sir.
hardest date is when they go and print the warrant. But I know in the past that they've put articles in the warrant and just pulled them right at the end. So I do think we should probably, communicate with the selectmen. What are the open items, and that it'll be coming their way so they can start thinking about it. I don't think we should wait for their very last minute to start talking to them.
Sure thing. I agree.
Thank you, Eric. And Mr. Chair, last question. I understand that there's very little that can be communicated between meetings, but it sounds like Niche is, if I'm saying that properly, that it's very kind of them to start the work. And it sounds like Mr. Benenson has agreed to get the $2,400 in the account this week. While it doesn't seem like we would be on another planning board until those items are completed, is there a way to communicate somehow that that $2,400 was in fact deposited this week, or at the time that it's deposited, that we can have some clarity that at least we're moving forward on that?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that at all. And I think it would, in my opinion, right, and Todd, you can offer yours as well. I mean, we'd like to get the feedback as quickly as possible, but we also don't want to badger our peer reviewer incessantly, right? To, make them, not that they do that, right? I'm just saying, so I would feel more comfortable being able to ask them for an update and also provide information to say, hey, we have the money for this in the account. Can you provide an update? And then if they give that to it, up to you, Todd. If I don't see an issue communicating that between meetings.
If I may.
Of course, yeah.
I remain in communication with them. Basically every other day I've been reaching out to them. And I've had some pretty good and productive conversations with them, especially when it comes to having them be willing and able to perform the work of the as-built review, knowing that there are some substantial hanging invoices that have yet to be satisfied. They're willing to go out on a limb and demonstrate that consideration and courtesy towards us, which is great. However, before they release their final letter that recommends these roads be accepted or the subdivision work is verified and completed, all the hanging invoices need to be satisfied and addressed. But that's a issue for later on down the alphabet. Right now, we're at the very beginning portions. So step A is to have the as-built, fully satisfied and paid for. Then meanwhile, they'll contribute and do this work over the coming weeks. Then afterwards, we can address the hanging balance then. And I'm hoping that Mr. Benenson will be able to come through with us and make sure that we get these issues resolved.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
So I have a question. Sorry, it's John Balowitz. I'm sorry, I might have missed this because I was late connecting, but you're talking about the remaining balance. I assume the 5,700, that's the remaining balance. Is that, yeah, I heard that Niche will move forward with the 2,400. They'll move forward with the review while the money for the 2,400 for this actual cost of this actual review comes in. And then
Yes.
you talk about the remaining balance.
Yes.
Is the expectation that the remaining balance will be paid from Andy Benenson as it is, or from the bond? Are we going to vote on a joint check agreement tonight?
We're not going to be voting on a joint check agreement tonight. There isn't enough money. There's not enough money in the remaining bond to pay off all these old invoices, which I remind you are the original responsibility of the applicant. And
Sorry,
regardless,
what invoices are we talking about? Are we talking about the
These-
5,700 for niche, or you're talking about
Yes.
the entity? Okay, so,
oh, sure. This is, yes, I'm so sorry if that was unclear. These are for the first two invoices back from 2020 that were due to Niche then. Niche was willing to perform the as-built review for us. That's the $2,400 aspect of this. They've already begun that work gratefully. However, there still is that hanging balance of remaining $5,000 or so that needs to be
Right.
addressed before they're going to be able to release their final recommendations letter or anything else that's kind of the
what I'm trying
the
to
end
understand
deliverable.
is the remaining balance in the bond, because as of last January, February, we had enough that would have paid the $25,000 to Ross, with enough left over to pay the remaining balance of the 5,781 or whatever the number was, with a very slight amount left, which what I assume would have still been gaining interest in some sort of escrow account for a year. So I'm surprised that we don't have enough, because based on the numbers that were shared last February, I don't think anything was paid out of the bond since then, unless I'm mistaken. So
I'll review all the financials again, but it was
Yep.
my understanding as of last week that we don't have enough to pay all of the bills out of the bond itself. Hence why Mr. Benenson was gracious enough to address the $2,400 fee that's leveled for the peer review process. But that said,
No,
again,
correct.
that's a question for later on down the line. I'm mostly focused on the immediate objective, which is getting the as-built process completed, and then we can address the other obstacles in due time after that.
okay, I just saying this because I answered that question 2 weeks ago when I looked back at the old data and I didn't get a response. So I expect there to be at least around 5,800. So it should be plenty to pay that amount unless something's changed. So if you can just kind of take an action to respond to that by the end of the week, that would be great. So I think
Yeah,
that should be there. And I was hoping we'd be able to vote on the joint check agreement, because now we have to wait 2 weeks for that. Because of that. I mean, not that that's going to hold anything up from my understanding, but it's something that I thought we'd talk about tonight.
Yeah, I spoke with the town administrator, Don Lowe, about the whether or not a joint check agreement was warranted or needed. And both he and I came to the understanding that we came to the conclusion that a joint check agreement is not necessary. While we do have Andrew Benenson willing to step in and help with the matter of the $2,400 that he already agreed that he would be paying off today, which is great. So it looks like it may be an administrative process that is not necessarily needed at this point in time. But if it does come up, both Don and myself will absolutely charge ahead and see that it gets done.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, so unless anyone else has any questions or comments, I think we'll have the next step, which is to get, at least the 2,400, more for the balance would be great, but at least that into that account, and certainly can provide an update if we get that, and if we get any additional update from the peer reviewer, which may be more forthcoming. We'd say, hey, we have the money, how's it going? And we get anything from them on timing, whether we'll have anything to review at our next meeting, or not. So
Very good. To the chair, if I may also.
Yeah.
Now, upon receipt of that $2,400 check for Niche Engineering's peer review, would you like me to would you like me to send a copy of it along to everyone at the board? Just to let folks know that we've received that check and everything is all as it should be. How would you prefer I reach out to everyone?
I don't, no preference. I think if you were maybe to provide an update in, next week sometime to the interested parties on where we are as requested, including the board, I think that would be that'd be fine with me.
Very good. Will do.
Okay. There's no other conversation. We don't have anything else on our agenda. So unless Todd or members of the board have something else they'd like to discuss, I think we've completed our agenda for this evening.
First, I do have something that comes to mind. Some of the other items that do I have the floor? Sir?
Oh, absolutely, of course.
All right, sorry.
I'm
Some of the items that were discussed.
gonna sign off if we're done with Century Mill Estates. Is that okay?
We are, thank you. As soon as we can get the check, we would like to see it.
Yep. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
With that, what was I? Oh, right. So for the previous discussion items that we were talking about at last meeting, there has been no new movement from town council. There has been no movement either against or for. It's just kind of been at a holding pattern now. If anything does move on that fact, I will be sure to keep the board apprised.
Sure, appreciate that.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, there's nothing else. We'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
You muted, Todd.
Can't hear you, Todd, but I think we're all in favor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said I was going to go with, if anyone wants, I'll just go with an all in favor, say aye. All opposed, say hold on.
All in favor, aye.
aye,
Aye.
new record.
Aye.
This was a brief one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you
Have a
much,
great
Tom.
rest of your evening.
Have a good night.
Take care.